طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. I'd like to welcome you all to the first lecture on week 9 of ICS 104. Anyone has any question before we proceed?
Yes, doctor.
تفضل.
About quizzes. When are we going to see the grades?
Tonight, inshallah. Tonight you will see them. Before the midterm, bismillah, you will see them. Okay, inshallah. Anything else? Okay. طيب.
Doctor.
Yes.
Yes. The quiz that was supposed to be this week, will we take it next week?
We'll agree on that. Don't worry.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do it the week after. I don't know. But if some of you have still midterms next week, we can postpone it, inshallah.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay. طيب, let me then go ahead and start sharing. Do you see the screen? Do you see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Right. So basically, the last thing that we did the other day was when we talked about variable scope, and we looked at the relationship between, defining the variable and, where would the variable be accessible within a certain function. So now we'll talk or we will conclude our discussion on variable scope by discussing what we call global variable. So any variable that is defined outside a function is a global variable. What do we mean by global variable? Global variable means it's global, it's accessible to everybody. Okay, it is accessible to everybody. It's not only limited, for example, to the function that it is defined, within its boundaries. Just like, for example, the function argument. The function argument, it is basically created when the function is called, and once the function finishes, it disappears. It goes away. Well, this is not the case with global variable. Okay, right. Now, a global variable is visible to all functions defined after it. Actually, this thing here defined after it. It was taken from the book, but it need not be defined after it. You can actually, define the variable after the definition of the function, but it will be accessible from the function as long as you call it, after it is defined. And inshallah, we will see that in the example. Okay, we will see that in the example. So basically, visibility means you can get the value of the variable from any function. You can get the value of the variable from any function. However, any function that wishes to update a global variable must include a global declaration. So as far as access of a global variable, as long as it is within the scope, you can access it as you wish. You can get its value as you wish. Once you would like to update a global variable, for example, it will be in the left-hand side of the assignment, then you have to declare that variable as global before you do that. Otherwise, it will give you an error. Okay? Otherwise, it will give you an error. So let's look at these two examples. Okay? So here, this is an example, balance equal 1,000, right? And then here we have define withdraw amount. Okay? Define withdraw amount. And here, let's uncomment this. So we have global balance. So this is basically the definition of or declaration of the variable balance as global, because it's coming from, you know, outside the function. And who can tell me what is the attempt to update the value balance here? Which line? Which line attempts to update the variable balance?
In the line 6.
In line 6. Line 5, does it update variable balance?
No. It's checks.
Yeah, line 5 is fine, صح? Line 5 is fine, right? So here now we say, you know, withdraw 200. So when we call the function withdraw 200, it comes here. Well, this is defined as global. So if balance is greater than or equal to amount, well, balance is equal basically to 1,000. 1,000 is greater than or equal to 200. Yes, the answer is true. So this will be executed, and the value of the right-hand side becomes equal to 800, and it is assigned balance, right? So after execution of this function, do you think that the value of, you know, balance will change, the global variable here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So if I do shift enter, as you can see, you know, it gave 800. It gave 800. Now let's see what will happen if I, you know, if I comment this line. If I comment this line, let's see what will happen. Shift enter. Look at this. It gave an error. Why? Because it recognized balance as a local variable. It recognized balance as a local variable. So therefore, you know, you cannot try to update a global variable. You cannot update a global variable if you do not declare it as global inside the function. If you do not declare it as global inside the function. On the other hand, let's look at the other example, this example here on the right. This example does not declare, you know, balance as a global variable, and this is the function basically says, you know, if balance is greater than or equal to amount, new balance equals balance minus amount, print new balance, and then withdraw 200, and then print current value of balance equals balance. So let me ask the following question. What does the function do with the variable balance in this case, the global variable balance? What does it do with the global variable balance?
Add it to another variable.
Add it to another variable. So this means that if I try to run this code, it will not work because this is commented, صح?
Yes.
We didn't change the value.
Who said we didn't change the value?
Me.
Faisal. So we didn't change it. So what I'm saying is wrong, يعني?
لا, we are trying. Because we didn't declare it as a global in the.
So what will happen?
Error.
Error. ما شاء الله عليك. أنت كنت صح وغلطت حالك.
أجل هرجع للأولى أجل.
You said it right. يا شباب هنا this is balance minus amount. This does not change the value balance. If I had balance here in the left-hand side of the assignment statement, yes, I will be trying to update it. But here I'm not trying to update it. I'm not trying to update it. So if I run this, nothing will go wrong. Nothing will go wrong. The value of new balance, which is printed inside the function, became 800, yes. But I didn't change the value of balance. طلع. Current value of balance equal 1,000. I did not attempt to update it. I did not attempt to update it.
So, Doctor, we use the global to update
Only if you plan to update it. Yes, you only
Okay.
use global if you plan to update it. If you plan to just access it, access its value, get its value, to be included in certain arithmetic operation, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to declare it as global. واضح يا شباب؟
واضح.
طيب, now let me just one last thing, which is to show you that I can access a global variable even if it was defined after the function, right? So for example, let's define here a new variable called a new global, okay? New global equals, let's say 80, okay? So as you can see, this definition comes after the definition of the withdraw. صح ولا لا? In fact, let's make it 8,000. So that's okay. Let us make it 8,000, and here let's say I will print the value of new global. So new global equals and new global. Okay. Right. So now this variable is defined after the definition of a function, right? طيب. But inside the function, I'm accessing a new global variable. I'm accessing the new global variable. So do you think when I execute the withdraw 200, it will cause an error? Remember, I only defined balance as a global.
The withdrawal will not result in an error.
Why?
But the new global will result in error. It will be undefined.
A new global will be undefined.
Yes.
طيب, خلينا نشوف. No. New global is not undefined. Why? Because it has been defined before I call the function. That's the most important thing.
Oh.
Okay, it is defined before I call the function. See, as long as the variable was defined before I called the function, even if the function definition came before it, it will not matter. واضح? However, the convention is, that you define the global variables, before your definitions of all your functions. That's
So if I place line 9 and line 11, there'll be a problem. There'll be an error.
Of course. If you put the withdraw 200 and then you say new global, because if you put the withdraw 200 here, then when you try to access, execute the function, you see here a new global that you have not seen before. صح ولا لا؟ فdefinitely it will cause an error. Okay, definitely it will cause an error. Okay. Right. So if you omit the global declaration, then the balance variable inside withdraw function is considered a local variable. Generally, global variables are not a good idea. When multiple functions update global variables, the result can be difficult to predict. Try to avoid using global variables, right? Try to avoid using global variables. Particularly in larger programs developed by multiple programmers, it is important that the effect of each function be clear and easy to understand. Otherwise, if you are going to use, global variables, you might need to put globals in so many places, for example, in the function, right? So what is a good alternative to global variables? Well, if you need to access a certain value, put it as part of a parameter of a function. Put it as part of a parameter of a function, but don't define it as a global variable. Don't define it as a global variable. Okay. So this basically ends our discussion on functions, and now we move on to lists, tuples, and dictionaries. This basically addresses, chapter 6, sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, and chapter 8, section 2. Section 1 talks about sets, but since sets do not have that many, applications in programming, we decided to omit it. And we will only work with dictionaries. Dictionaries are, more important, and you might deal with dictionaries more. So what do we expect to learn after we, address these two chapters, those sections in these two chapters? Well, you'll be able to collect elements using lists, use the for loop for traversing lists, learn common algorithms for processing lists, use lists with functions, build and use a dictionary container, and finally work with a dictionary for table lookup. Okay, work with a dictionary for table lookup, and this is basically from chapter 8. So let's start with the motivation for having lists. Okay, let's start with the motivation for having lists. So assume that you are given 10 values to store in a program for later processing. Okay, for example, assume that you have these 10 values, 32, 54, whatever, until 65, and you would like to store them for later processing. Like maybe, for example, you would like to find the largest element, you would like to find the smallest element. Okay, so how can we do that based on what we have learned? How can we store these 10 values?
If there's a pattern between them, you can use for I.
Say that again.
If there is a pattern between them, we can use for I.
If there is a
pattern.
I didn't.
You want to print those or store those?
Store.
Okay.
Store. So the for loop, if you are thinking about a for loop, you cannot store the 10 values in the for loop. I mean,
because every time in the loop there will be a new variable.
It will be a new value assigned to the variable, right? If you try to use one variable, then every time you will override the previous one. So the only way that that one can think of is basically define 10 variables. Huh? Define 10 variables. So define 10 variables, value 1, value 2, value 3, all the way up to value 10. All the way up to value 10. Now, such a sequence of variables is not very practical to use. Anyone has any, idea why is it the case that, doing this way is not a good idea?
It takes a lot of time.
It takes
a lot of time, so maybe it will be there.
It takes a lot of time. Well, in fact, time is not that of a concern. I mean, you can define them. Or if there is an error, you can fix it. When you compile your program. So I don't think that time is an issue.
Dealing with a lot of data.
Dealing with a lot of data. Well, yes. I mean, imagine if you want to define 100 values or 1,000 values or 10,000 values. And these days, with the applications of these days, I mean, 1,000 values stored, at one time is not something unheard of. Huh? It's not something unheard of. So imagine, you need to write 1,000 lines of code, to put these 1,000 variables, right? And then imagine, you know, if you want to find the minimum or the maximum of these 1,000 variables, because they are all, you know, each one has a specific name, huh? How
You
are
have
you
to write
going to do?
all the names you want to get the minimum of the values, of the maximum of them.
It's going to be a nightmare, you know. To try to solve problems this way is going to be a nightmare. That's why we Python provided lists, you know, to overcome this difficulty. So what is a list? Well, a list is basically, you know, a group of values stored in a specific, you know, or referenced by a specific variable. In this case, we define it using the square bracket, the open square bracket, closed square bracket. So whatever is in between is basically a different value stored in this, you know, variable values, which is of type list. So the square brackets indicate that we are creating a list, and the items are stored in the order they are provided. So lists obey the order. Ordering is important in lists, right? Ordering is important in lists. So 32 is stored as the first element, as you can see here. You know, 32 is stored as the first element. 54 is stored as the second element, and so on and so forth, right? Until you reach the last one, which is 65. Well, this is 65. And in effect, here, as if you have, you know, defined n different variables, because you can access each one of them and you can update each one of them. You can access each one of them and you can update each one of them. Okay, so let's see how it does that, right? So as we mentioned, a list is a sequence of elements, each of which has an integer position or an index. As you can see, the first one has index 0, the second one has index 1, the third one has index 2, 3, all the way up to index 9. So this means that we have here 10 different variables, right? We have 10 different variables. To access a list element, you specify which index you want to use. So the variable name here, values, when you say values 5, values between square brackets 5, well, this means that this is the sixth element, which is values 5, right? Which is values 5. So this is done with the subscript operator in the same way that you access individual characters in a string. Remember, how did we access individual characters in a string?
Yes, we have the index number between square brackets.
Yeah, you just put the square number between, you just put the number between the square brackets. It's here, it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. So you can see here, values is defined as, you know, 32, 54, whatever, until 65, okay? And then I can access, you know, the sixth element, which is in values 5, okay, values 5. Now, values 5 originally was what? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So values 5 was 80. Values 5 was 80 when this list was created, right? But now, when you specify values 5 equal 87, now you changed the value of, you know, the sixth variable in the list, and you made it basically 87 instead of 80. So now, if you print the whole list again, it will print basically the sixth element as 87. Okay, and let's actually do that here. So let's print the whole list. Let's see how does it print, you know, the whole list. So we will see how does it print the whole list, and then we will see, you know, how does it print, you know, the type of how does print, values 5, a specific value inside the list. And here it, shows how to print any property of a variable inside the list, like for example the type. And in order to be consistent, let's actually also print the values before. ايش رايكم? Let's print the values, before, not before it has been defined. This will give an error, صح? If it was not defined before. We want to print it after we defined it. Okay. After we define it, but before we change values 5. So let's run this and let's see what happens. Okay. Right. So as you can see, the list before change 32. This value is basically 80. After we changed values 5, now this has become 87, and it shows 87. Okay. Right. Now, what is the type of values 2, the third element in values? Well, this is the third element in values. The type is float. This is the fourth element, which is values 3, and the type is int. So can we conclude, does the list require that all its elements are of the same type?
No.
No. We can actually have even a string. We can have a string. Okay. So for example, values 2. Well, let's say values 1 is equal to Faisal. So it doesn't necessarily, require that all elements have the same type. In fact, this is an advantage of lists, is that you can have elements of mixed types. Okay, inside the list. Yes.
How can I print the list as shown in the picture?
As shown in this is just
254. Yeah. Like this.
We need to learn the graphics. We need to learn how to use colors, and which is outside the scope of this course.
No, I don't mean the colors. I mean the order.
Oh, the order, like, in this way. Well, you should be able to do it
with using end.
Using
end.
End. What do you mean by end?
No. Sorry. I don't.
We will use the for loop. هلا راح تشوف. Okay. طيب. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between lists and strings. So there are two main differences between lists and strings. Lists can hold values of any type, as we have seen, right? Whereas strings are sequences of characters. A string has to contain only characters. Strings are immutable. What does that mean? You cannot change the characters in the sequence. You cannot change the characters of a string in a sequence, right? But you can change the values of a list, as we have seen before. We can change the values of a list as we have seen before. But for strings, you cannot change, individual characters in the string. Okay. All what you can do is you attempt to change it, but you assign it somewhere else, right? But you cannot change, specific characters in a string. You cannot change specific characters in a string because they are immutable. They are unchangeable. Once you define a string, you cannot change it. Once you define a string, you cannot change it, unless, of course, you assign it to a different string. Unless you assign it to a different string. But lists are mutable. Okay.
Doctor, I can use replace method.
Hello. You can use the replace method. طيب, when you use the replace method, do you use it on the same string?
Yes, it will work.
It will work. طيب, let's see here. So let's say, value. No, not value. My string equals, and then what do you want to do? My string
My string equal, doctor.
My string equal.
Mm-hmm.
See, once you say my string equal, you're changing it.
But the same name.
You're changing it. But can you say my string to, equals? I want to change the M to X. Can you do that?
I don't know. I didn't try it.
You can. You can reassign the value of my string. Yes. You can use the replace, you can use upper, you can use lower, you can use whatever. But you use the upper or the lower here in the right-hand side, and you reassign it to the my string. And you reassign it to my string. Okay?
Okay, I got it. Yeah. Thank you.
تمام?
Yes.
Right. So this is basically what we were talking about, if you just, put an open square bracket, closed square bracket, this defines an empty list, right? This defines an empty list. If you put values, then these will be the initial values of the list in the list variable. This is basically, how to access a specific element in a list by putting, the index between the square brackets. And of course, you can, access that element. You can actually assign that element to some other values. Okay. So this is how we, create a list or access an element in the list. طيب, I need somebody to tell us, hold the mic and tell us, what's the difference between these two statements. What is the difference between these two statements? أيوة يا فيصل.
The first one just specify a certain value of the value itself, the variable.
It accesses the fifth value in the list.
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
The
second one is a list of one value, which is 4.
Exactly. So the second one is a list with exactly one value, which is 4. So that's the main difference. That's the difference between these two. So when accessing a variable in a list, the index of the list must stay within the valid range. Otherwise, an out-of-range error will result from using an index not in the range. So, for example, assume you have, the list values that we had before. Remember, it was 10 elements. So the indices were from 0 to 9. Now, what happens when you attempt to do something like this? Values 10 equal 87. What will happen? Well, it will give an index error, index out of range, right? So the range of the values in a list goes from 0 to, now what do you think? To what? Without knowing. What did we use to find the length of a string?
From n to n minus 1.
Say that again.
From 0 to n minus 1.
To n minus 1. So what is the value of n? How can you get the value of n? Using which function?
Len values.
Len values, right? So it's from 0 to len values minus 1. From 0 to len values minus 1. طبعا maybe I mentioned before that as far as negative indices are concerned, you can use minus 1, minus 2, minus 3 up to minus len, right? So minus 1 basically will be the 65, minus 2 will be the 100, all the way minus len will be 32, but we did not talk about the negative indices, okay? But you can try them. You can try them. Well, let me show you one of them, okay? Oops. Oh, I don't print, huh? So let's say print values. Okay. So and let's print values basically to show the difference between the two. So as you can see, 87. When you say values minus 10, 87, you changed from minus 1, which is the last one, minus 1, minus 2. So this is another way of accessing list, which is, by the way, exactly the same as in string. So one can use the len function to obtain the length of the list. You already mentioned it. Right. Now, list traversal refers to visiting and maybe processing each element in the list once. Each element in the list once. There are two ways to traverse a list. There are two ways to traverse a list, visiting each element. Who can tell me? I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. If I want to access the element of the list, what should I use?
Square brackets.
No, I meant all the elements, not only a single one.
For loop.
For loop, right? For loop, and we can do that in two different modes. We can do that in two different modes. In the first mode, I will have access to both the index and the value. The index, which means the variable, right? And the value. The variable and the value, right? So if I define, values like this, and then I run this, it will basically print, each index and the value corresponding to that index, right? So this is the first variable, second, third, all the way up to the 9th. Okay, so this is one way. The other way is you only have access to the values of the list, not the variable. So this is, in this case, it will be for I in, what should we say? For I in? Values. Okay. Or for element in values, print element. For I in values, print I. Okay. So if we run this, as you can see, we have only access to the values. We have only access to the values. We don't have access to the variables. If you want to change, like interchange certain variables with each other, which one should you use? Should you use range len values, or should you use in values? You want to replace the values of some of the lists, like for example, bring the 44.5 here and bring the 29 here. Then we need to use this version. We need to use this version because in this version we have access to both the variable and and the value. Here we only have access to the value. Okay. Right. Now, make sure you see the difference between the list variable and the list content. The list variable is the named alias or pointer to the list, which is basically, in this case, it's the values. So values, the variable values, by the way, does not contain the elements, 32, 54. No. The variable values contains a reference, a pointer, if I want to use C language. No, not C language, I mean C terminology, or terminology of the old, when they used to talk about pointers. Nowadays, they talk about references. So it's just, it's a reference to the address of the first element in the list. Okay? It does not contain the elements are not, squeezed in value. The elements are not squeezed in value. The list content is basically the memory where the values are stored. These are the list contents. Okay? These are the list contents. So this is basically an address. Okay? An address, a reference, a pointer, all these basically give the same meaning, right? And which is usually elsewhere, by the way. They might not be, the address of the variable values might be different from, the address of, or, the contents of the whole list inside memory. Okay, so the reference is basically, so basically a list variable contains a reference to the list contents. The reference is the location of the list contents in memory. Right. Now, why is this important? Well, this is important because of the following. When you assign a list variable into another, both variables refer to the same list. Both variables refer to the same list. For example, if you do this, scores equal 10, 9, 7, 4, 5, and then values equal scores, then did you define a new list that contains 10, 9, 7, 4, 5? The answer is no. The answer is no. The first line creates this, creates the list, right? With these initial values, 10, 9, 7, 4, 5. But the second assignment statement will do what? Will copy the address of scores to values. Will copy the address of scores to values. So now scores and values have the same address. So now scores and values have the same address. Right. Now what does that mean? Well, this means that if scores changes a value here, is that change also reflected in values?
Yes.
Yes, immediately, because they are referring to the same thing. So, for example, when you change scores 3, what is the value of scores 3? Well, scores 3, if we use this picture, scores 3 is this, right? The 4. So if you change it to 10, you are also changing values 3 to 10 immediately, instantly, right? Instantly. So that's why, for example, when I try to run this code, oh, it gave an error because I did not run this before. So let me first run this. Okay. Now, when I try to run this code, what happens when I print values 3? Although I changed scores 3, when I print values 3 gives me 10. Okay, the new value that is assigned by scores. The new value that is assigned by scores. Is that clear, ya shabab?
Yes.
Okay, I need somebody let's do this. First of all, define a list of integers primes containing the first 5 prime numbers on the chat. On the chat, I want to write here a variable of type list that is called the prime, which contains the first 5 prime numbers. Who can tell us what are the first 5 prime numbers? What's the prime number?
1, 3, 5, 9, 11.
No, just a second. What's the definition of a prime number?
You cannot divide it by 2, only can divide it by itself.
You can only divide it by 1 or itself. Right? You can only divide it by 1 or itself. طيب. What is the first prime number?
1, 3.
لا لحظة شوي. 1 is not a prime number. It's not considered the first prime number.
2, 3.
2 is
5.
the first prime number. So 2, 3, 5,
7, 11.
7, 11. يلا يا شباب. Define it. And then after you define it, I need you to tell me what is the output of this code. How does, for example, if I print prime, what will be printed? Okay, what will be printed? يلا يا شباب, on the chat. طيب, so Abdul Hamid, he gave us prime, should be prime, Abdul Hamid, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. We would like to use primes, the same name here, so that, you know, the code runs properly. Okay, طيب. Now, who can tell me what will be the elements of the list prime after we execute lines 4 and 5?
I think it's going to be 5.
It's going to be 5. Yani it will, instead of a list of 5 values, it becomes only 1 value.
I think the last 2 numbers will be changed.
Write it on chat. Write it on the chat. What will be the values, and then we will do it together. We will do this together. Let me see first the first answer, and then I will show you how would I, you know, do this. طيب. Until now, I don't seem to have any answer. Muhammad, when you put 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, are you saying that nothing has changed? Okay. So Saad, he said that the list will look like this. Let me copy paste. Here. Okay. So this is what he said. Right. Now let me show you how would I solve this question. Now, what did we say about lists? We say the lists have, you know, n variables, where n is the length of the list. So this is what I have to do. Is I need to define, you know, for, you know, prime, mind my, you know, so I need to define, you know, prime 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because I have 5 values, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Right? Remember when we used for loops and we were doing tracing, this is what we did. You know, we defined for each variable a column. So this will be, you know, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. So that's the initial, which is basically based on this. Right. Now, for I in range 2. So what are the values of I for the 2 iterations?
0, 1.
0, 1. معلش يا شباب, I'm going to keep you a couple of minutes. We need to finish this. So 0 and 1. So when I is 0, what do we have here? Prime 4 minus 0, 4 equal prime 0. What is prime 0? Well, prime 0 is 2, so 2 will be assigned to prime 4. What is prime 4? Well, 2 will come here. Okay? And then, so this is the first iteration. In the second iteration, I is equal to 1. Right? So prime 4 minus 1, prime 3 is equal to prime 1. So I need to first evaluate the right-hand side, prime 1, which is equal to 3, and then I will assign it to prime 3. So this will be 3. So is the answer of Saad correct? 2, 3, 5, 3, 2. Yes. Okay. The answer is absolutely correct. So if you do this, hopefully you will not face any difficulty or make any mistake, right? Because as I said, every element in the list is a variable. You can assign it, you can change it, you can do whatever you do to a regular variable. Right. So as I said, and I need a couple of minutes so that we become in par with the other section. If we do not know all the elements of the list beforehand, we can create an empty list and start adding to it. How do we do that? Well, we do that using the append operator. So we can define an empty list like number 1 here. And then what we do is we append Harry. So we will put at the end of the list Harry. Well, of course, the list currently has only 1. Right. If you append Emily, append Bob, append Carrie, what will happen? Well, you will add, Emily to the end after Harry, and then you will add Bob after, Emily, and then you will add Carrie after Bob. So this is what append does. Whereas if you want to put it in a specific location, you use insert. Okay, you use insert. So for example, assume that you have the list friends Harry, Emily, Bob, and Carrie, and a new element has to be inserted at a specific position. Okay. For example, assume that you would like to insert Cindy in the second line here. So what do? You basically use friends.insert and then the position and the element. Right. Who can tell me what will happen to Emily, Bob, Bukhari? Is it going to override Emily?
No, we're gonna push them.
It will push them down. It will push them down. Okay. It will push them down. So if we try to run this code, you will see that Emily, Bob, and Carrie have been pushed down, and now Cindy is the second element. You can see here that Cindy is the second element, or at index 0. So note that the index at which a new element is to be inserted must be between 0 and the number of elements in the list, right? We can insert in the 0, 1, 2. We can also insert in the length of the list, right? Which is similar to what? If you want to insert at friends.insert len of list and Cindy. Friends.insert len of the list and Cindy. This is equivalent to what? If somebody answers this means that he is very attentive with me. شكلكم عم بتفكروا بال going out. Okay, خلاص. It's similar to append يا شباب. مش append put at the end of the list. Append insert at the end of the list.
Yes.
So when you say so when you say friends.insert the length of the list and then you put the element, it's the same as friends.append and then the element. Okay.
This is the same job.
Yes, it will do exactly the same job. It will do exactly the same job. I apologize for keeping you 4 minutes or 5 minutes, but we needed, to finish this part so that we are, at the same pace with the other section. ماشي يا شباب؟ نعم تفضل.
Insert is more specific than Appen, correct?
تعيد ما فهمت ولا شيء.
I mean the insert is more specific than Appen. If you want.
Yes. Append will always add at the end of the list.
Okay.
Well, it's just like append. The term append is when you add something. So you add something at the end of the list. But insert, you can add an element anywhere in the list, including at the end.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay يا شباب. يلا جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. إن شاء الله نراكم على خير بإذن الله. دي عفرة الله.
Thank you.